Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Teresa McCreary, and thank you. Hi. And we are about to start, but I have asked our Dean of the College of Liberal Arts to introduce the concert. She's going to say a few words. I have to say this one last time before I retire. Please turn off all cell phones. If by chance your phone rings during the concert, you will be asked to come up and play the French horn. Silence all your beeping. Okay, here she is, Dr. Allison Goff. Please welcome her.
I don't think I'm going to read anything, but I'm putting my glasses on anyway. I'm Dr. Alison Goff. I am the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts, which is the home of performing arts at HPU, and nothing makes me prouder than to say that. So welcome everybody to our spring orchestral concert. And you will notice that the title of our concert is Contemporary Collaboration. I'm going to unpack both of those bits, if you allow me. So, first of all, we are, really for the first time in a long time, examining a program of contemporary music. Now, for those of you who were born in this century, contemporary actually means music from the last century as well, so don't get confused. But most of our composers tonight really were living in the 20th and the 21st century, and this includes our own Austin Jones, who is a graduating student tonight, and I would like him to come up and receive congratulations. Austin is an exemplar of the students who are in all of our music and performing arts programs. You don't necessarily have to be a performing arts, a music major, an arts major, although we have those. You can major in anything and find your joy and your passion in the arts, which many of our students have done. The second person that I do need to talk about tonight before we go any further is our own Dr. Teresa McCreary. She's Yes, you can go. She is and will continue to be the Director of Performing Arts, but only until August of this year, because she is retiring and this is her last concert. Woo! She's about the only one happy about that, I must say. I could say a lot about Teresa, but apparently I'm not allowed to say most of those things in the public forum, so I'll just be quiet. But I will say that Teresa and I, at least at HPU, go back before I became Dean, and I got to know her over a long period of time. And just a kind of, personal note of thanks. Of course, she's done tremendous things for the music programs at HPU, including starting our own arts and markets major. So if you don't want to become a starving artist, this is the program for you. And that's a tremendous achievement because she fought for such a long time to get that off the ground and to get that program well resourced. And I will say she's been a bit of a pain in my neck, right, in asking me for resources, because of course I'm the bean counter, but I love her despite that. But on a personal note, I've always loved music, but I hadn't played music for a long time until Teresa really, encouraged me to start that again. So those sorts of connections are really important at HPU. And I know that Teresa in particular has fostered those sorts of relationships with colleagues and with students, and students in particular have found themselves so very closely mentored, and they owe Teresa an enormous amount. So we will be conducting lots of thank yous and hui-hos to Teresa for for the next few months, but I did want to say formally, Teresa, at your last concert, thank you for everything. So, without further ado, on to the second part of our concerts theme tonight, collaboration. I'm very, very happy and honoured to welcome the students from Kamehameha High School Orchestra under the direction of Elton Masaki to start our program off. Thank you and enjoy.
You have a microphone? Oh.
Test.
Oh, it's on. Thank God.
This is Kelsey Okumura. She'll be doing singing the next piece called Never Enough. Accompanying us on piano is Angelique Kim.
Ready?
I'm trying to hold my breath, let it stay this way. Can't let this moment end. You set off a dream in me, getting louder now. Can you hear it echoing? Take my hand, will you share this with me? 'Cause darling, without you, all the shine, a thousand spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough, and never be enough. Towers of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough, and never be enough for me. And never, 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 never for me, for me. And never enough, and never enough, and never enough for me, for me. All that shine, no thousand spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough, and never be enough. Times of gold are still too little. These hands could hold the world, but it'll never be enough, and never be enough for me.
Bravo, bravo. You know, one of the reasons that, by the way, string quartet, you can come to the stage while I'm talking. One of the reasons we collaborated with Kamehameha is because we, here at HPU, have a dual credit program where high school students are able to acquire college credit. And essentially, this allows the student to finish college in 2 years, basically, because they do the first 2 years while they're still in high school. And we've had a lot of success with this program, and you can see why. Of course, saves money, saves time, and we really enjoy having our Kamehameha students as a part of our curriculum. The next group is our quartet, string quartet from HPU, and they'll be playing Dvorak, one of his most beloved string quartets, nicknamed the American. And it's because Dvorak loved folk music, and he especially loved American folk music. So when you listen to this piece, you'll hear hints of that style of music, as well as some folk tunes themselves. It sounds, immediately familiar to the ear because of that. So they will be playing the Irish Star from Dances with Winds by Shelley Hansen. And you might see a theme during this concert of folk music, because I personally love and enjoy playing and listening to folk music of all kinds, especially Irish and Scottish. So there'll be a little thread running through the concert program tonight. We are missing one clarinet player, which is unfortunate. She's not feeling well tonight, so there might be a few little empty spaces here and there, and that's because she's not well. So anyway, here we go. And as the orchestra, rest of you, come up to the stage, we'll continue with a student composition, which is very exciting. So back by popular demand, this piece was written a couple of years ago. Was right after or during COVID. That was one of the great things about COVID, was time to just create and create something beautiful. Was very fulfilling. And Austin and I have enjoyed having our compositions performed several times this semester. We just came back from Kauai and performed it there a couple of times, as well as the humpback whale. I was inspired by humpback whales mostly because they sing. We call it singing. It's a very unique kind of singing, but it is nevertheless singing and quite complex. Some of them last 45 minutes, these songs, and we've been able to notate them, get them down on paper, and so you'll hear some of that during the piece and see some activity of the humpbacks underwater first, and then we'll go up to the surface and out, which is a joyful dance. I consider it a dance that the whales do. They just seem so happy and so joyful. So again, the folk song theme will appear. In this one, it starts off with a sea shanty, Santa Ana, and it was written for clarinet solo. That's the same clarinet player who doesn't feel well tonight. So we have Jennifer on piano who transposed it. And then when we get to the above the surface activity on the video, the music turns into basically an Irish reel. So it's a lot of fun, and we have some authentic Hawaiian instruments. The kala'au, these are the large kala'au, the sticks that go on the floor, and those were gifted to us by a local halau. We feel very honored to be able to play those instruments tonight. Hope you enjoy it. Give us a minute to get all the technical stuff together. you. Thank you very much. So this one is very interesting piece, fun. It's from the movie Inception. By Hans, the film score is by Hans Zimmer, who's a total star right now in film score composing. And we got it from the two cellos, who are a YouTube sensation, Luca Sulik and Stefan Hauser. And they do covers of pop songs and film music, all kinds of things. And one of them is very conservative and clean cut. And then the other one is kind of wild and untethered. And so they're really fun to watch, the contrast. And Aubrey and I have decided that we're kind of the female version of the two cellos. I'll let you decide which one is which. from anime. It's some of you might remember Space Boy or Rocket Boy or somebody who was a comic strip character in the 80s and 90s, and this composer was really into Pink Floyd and also the Beatles, some vintage rock and roll. And he wrote this as a suite. This is just the first movement. It's kind of an introductory part of the whole suite. So it's pretty short, but it's very exciting and challenging for all of us. We really struggled with this one. Super challenging rhythmically, as well as just different meters, changing time signatures all over the place, and lots of different styles of playing. And then I was trying to conduct it, and I wasn't doing a very good job. And so then Mr. Masaki, the other conductor, tried it, and he was like, I don't like this piece, scares me. So we just gave it to a student. Who did a beautiful job. This is the same person who completely transcribed Mombasa for orchestra. So he listened to the two cellos playing it, and he wrote out orchestral parts for everybody. So Lyric is a star. Okay, no pressure. Well, this is just the perfect ending to the perfect, well, not so perfect career, but a wonderful career. Wonderful career. Not perfect, but wonderful. And I am particularly pleased with this group this year. It's a great way to go out with a strong group. There's some wonderful leaders, and I would like to thank all of you, especially for this experience. And HPU students, thank you for many, many years of fun and enjoyment and music making, you know, just the joy of making music together. I really appreciate you. And parents and faculty, staff, administration from HPU, thank you so much for your support of music at HPU and the arts. Dean Goff is especially supportive of the arts, and that just makes all the difference. It really does. And this full circle experience tonight, I wanted to share with you, is so interesting that I said my very first job was at Kamehameha, and then I went over to Iolani for 16 years, and there I met Elton Masaki, who was in my orchestra. So Elton was my student, and he was one of those kids who was just always in the orchestra room, you know? He was just always in the orchestra room. When we needed to find him, we just went to the orchestra room. And then ended up making a career out of it, quite a distinguished career. As a matter of fact, he is the conductor also of the Hawaii Youth Symphony 2, which is a fine group of musicians. And I'm just really proud of all my students. So thank you.
I also have to thank Dr. McCurry for pretty much my career. As a junior, I think I started to teach quartets, and as a senior, I don't know if you remember, but you let me teach beginning orchestra to elementary school kids, for better or for worse. And even after I left Iolani School, and Dr. McCurry was always so supportive of me, and I'm glad I could teach orchestra and be supportive to all of my students as well. And you'd be happy to know that most of the students here still live in the orchestra, like my orchestra now. So it's just like Iolani, but not.
Yeah, that's right.
But yes, and really, thank you to Lyric for conducting that piece. It was honestly pretty scary to conduct. Yeah.
Especially that piece.
Yeah. But thank you so much for this opportunity. High schools never get the chance to play with colleges ever. So this is a huge honor for us, and I'm so glad we could be a part of your last concert before you retire. So thank you so much.
Okay, I'll see you at the beach with my, umbrella drink. Okay?